with the trade deadline coming up, I think teams are going to get better. Like the Devils are going to try to add a goalie. We'll see. Like some teams on the fringe, we'll see if they actually go in or just go, you know what, it's not our year. And the Flyers are there. The Flyers are right there. And it, I guess, leads me to this first idea. Can they really sell? Can you actually selling to a locker room that has so wildly overperformed to this point?
Yes, because I really do think they're still going to sell. Now, will they sell as many people as some people want them to sell? I don't know. Like, I could envision this being a scenario where very few people are happy about what they do at the trade deadline because they don't buy. So the people who are all in on this team, that this is a team of destiny, that they've come together, that they have this special chemistry, they're going to be frustrated that the Flyers aren't going for it. But then the people who really are gung-ho on the rebuild, that are all, let's maximize assets, are going to be frustrated that, like, they don't trade Nick Seeler and they don't trade Scott Laughton. But I do think they are going to sell. I think I am expecting Shawn Walker to get moved. I really am. Based on everything I've heard over the last couple of days, I've done some digging on Walker. I don't think those two sides, the Flyers and Walker, have really seriously talked numbers. And to me, if we're coming up on mid-February and the two sides haven't talked numbers about a contract extension, I just can't imagine they keep him. I guess you could justify keeping him as like an own rental, but I don't think Danny Briere is that kind of GM. I don't think that's where his head's at. I think with somebody like Walker, it's either we re-sign him or we get assets for him because he's not part of this over the long term. And I don't see where he fits. So I think Walker probably goes as long as the Flyers get a reasonable offer for him. And then I could see, maybe one other guy. I mean, Scott Laughton is playing well. The Flyers want a first-round pick for him. If he keeps playing like he has the last two games, I think somebody's going to offer a first-round pick for him. That, to me, is going to be the really tough one for the Flyers, because you're talking about ripping the heart out of this team if you trade Scott Laughton at the trade deadline. It probably is the right move from an asset management standpoint. But you're talking about the one guy on this team with a letter. You're talking about a guy who plays with a ton of intensity, who's absolutely beloved in that room. I think if you trade Scott Laughton, even though he hasn't been that good this year, if you trade Laughton, I think this team is going to, at least for a week or so, drop off. And that might be all it takes to knock them out of a playoff spot. So to me, Laughton is the key to this whole thing, because if he gets traded, like, maybe the problem will solve itself and no one will offer anything of decent value for Laughton. Maybe the best offer they get for him is a third-round pick, and it's easy. It's like, okay, we'll keep him. We'll save it until the offseason. But if they get legitimate offers, I am going to be fascinated to see what Danny Briere does, because that is going to be the classic, like, okay, do we believe in this team or do we take the money and run?
It's really going to be, I can understand, like, the own rental thing. There are situations in which that might make sense, where you're like, you know what, a playoff run is worth more than the third round pick or whatever. Like, that sort of thing I can get in some situations. This is not one of those situations. Yeah. Like, if Shawn Walker, if there's anything, you trade him. That makes sense. Based on some of the rumors we're seeing and what's happening around the rest of the league, I can understand waiting to trade Scott Laughton until the offseason, because he has term. There's absolutely no rush. He's got 2 more years after this year. And if I hate to, like, oh, well, I don't want to upset the balance in the locker room, but man, for how long was the locker room a problem and now it isn't? It's really good. I maybe don't want to do that in the midst of a playoff race. If they do it, listen, we are in a rebuild, and they told us that from the very start, and I'll just have to deal with it, and I guess we all will. But I'm looking at a team like the Buffalo Sabres, where maybe it's not Casey Middlestat, maybe it's Peyton Krebs or something, but maybe a little bit more of a hockey trade for Laughton. They want a center with some experience. They have all their young pieces. They don't want futures. The Flyers, well, they'll take a young guy. They don't have too many of those the way Buffalo thinks they do. Maybe there's something there in the off season with them. where you're kind of not selling, not buying. It's just a good hockey trade for a guy that makes sense with the timeline. We'll see, though. It is going to be a very interesting situation. I will say, I thought it was going to be kind of, I can't imagine the return is still much. Mark Stahl ain't bad. Like, someone might want him to be their 7. Like, he can still play a little. He's not, the Flyers have iced worse defensemen on a nightly basis than the dude that barely plays for them right now. Like, over the last 7-8 years, there have been numerous dudes who are considerably worse than Mark Stahl is right now, playing every couple of, weeks, basically.
Yeah, well, that to me is why trading Walker, unless, and we've talked about this, unless you can find someone to take Ristolainen, that to me is why trading Walker makes sense, because they have too many defensemen. Like, Mark Stahl is a perfectly fine number 7 who can give you 40 games a year and be decent in those games. I know people gave him a lot of crap to start the year. He definitely had some rough games. He's not terrible. His underlying metrics are actually pretty darn good. He's a perfectly serviceable part-time defenseman. He's their number 8 right now because they just have too many guys. So this is kind of the perfect time where you could sell one of your defensemen and still go on a playoff run. Like, yes, it will hurt if they trade Shawn Walker. Shawn Walker's been good for the Flyers this year. He's been a really solid defenseman, has a real good chemistry with Nick Seeler. There was that one play that was really bad, the one goal they gave up last night. But for the most part, that pair has had really, really good chemistry. They have had good results together. It will hurt. But I don't think trading Shawn Walker automatically kills the Flyers' playoff chances, given the fact that all they will probably do is just move Travis Sanheim back over to the right side full-time, Jamie Drysdale, and then Rasmus Ristolainen. There's your 3 right side defensemen. That's good enough, especially given the points they banked. So this is a real opportunity with Walker if you're not going to re-sign him. It's a real opportunity to just maximize full value out of that Provorov trade. So I think that's going to happen. If I had to put money down, I think that's going to happen. I think Walker will get moved. I'm just not sure what else happens. And I just keep coming back to Scott Laughton as kind of the bellwether of where their thinking is at. Because if there is a compelling offer for him out there, they have to know that even if it's the right move for the long term, that it is going to rip the heart out of this team.
What does they want it seems like they have a pretty hard and fast price with Laughton. Like, we know what we want, a first round pick or more. Like, blow us away and we'll think about it.
And they should. That is one thing, though. And I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's one thing that you have to remember about the position the Flyers are in, which really does. I mean, it makes it tough for Danny, but it also makes it an enviable situation. Is that the Flyers are in a position where they don't have to make any trades. Like, when you're a team that is 5th from the bottom and everybody knows you're selling, it's basically, you're trying to get the best offer, but really you're just taking orders. In all seriousness, you are just taking orders and crossing your fingers that a bidding war starts up. The Flyers can, given the position they're in, they can conceivably say to a team that is basically saying, well, Shawn Walker's only worth a 3rd round pick to us. That's all we'll give you. And Danny Briere can say, all right, well, then we ain't trading him. We're in the playoff race. We don't need to trade this guy. And that's actually believable. Like, it's not, the other GM won't be like, oh, Danny's blowing smoke. He'll cave at the last minute. Danny Briere could be like, we are 3rd in the Metro right now. We don't need to trade anybody. I'm willing to trade our guys. But if you don't pay up, we'll keep everybody and we don't care. And that does give him leverage.
We all silly like the mayor.